Hello and welcome to the Hajime no Ippo podcast. I am your host, Jacob. On today's podcast, we're going to be focusing on and talking about two of my favorite characters, Ippo and Takamura. The reason I want to talk about both these characters is because they have an interesting relationship between each other. Currently, it seems like they're on the outs, with Takamura and Ippo not really having much interaction, with Ippo's retirement being a source of contention. And anytime Ippo is mentioned up or his return is mentioned up, Takamura tenses up or gets really angry, or a lot of things are happening, right? So I think an examination of them would be great, not only for us to focus on what's so interesting about both these characters and all that. To start off with, let's just give some background about these two characters, right? It's interesting because in their backstories, we see that when we're analyzing their origins, or like how they came to reach the work at the Kageyama gym, we see that they're from two very different backgrounds. Ippo being born from a working class family, working on a fishing boat, while Takamura was born from a rich family. And if you see those two ideas, you kind of can just use that as that source of understanding that. Takamura, he was born rich, and rich people are given a lot. And that's not to diminish all the work that Takamura has done, which I will get into later. But Takamura was born rich, and he's the boxer with basically the talent that was given to him. He was born with it. So much as like you're born into a rich family. While Ippo, on the other hand, as from his working class background, you see that he wasn't a born fighter. He did earn some, working in the fishing boat with his mother, helping his mother out. Ippo had some opportunity to gain some endurance and help himself gain some skills for boxing, but he was never a boxer, right? And even in the first a couple episodes, first couple chapters, first couple fights, Ippo is like, his IQ's not there. I remember one of the amateur tournaments, he was basically just getting pummeled and getting knocked down, and it was just a act of attrition. And the best thing that Kageyama could taught Ippo was, just grin it and keep on throwing those big punches. So you see that, right? Ippo really had to work hard and make it there. His hard work made him into a great boxer, right? But that's not to say that Ippo himself doesn't have some natural talents that made him into a boxer. As I recall, one difference that Ippo really takes for granted, some of the things that kind of come naturally to him or come easy for him, right? He doesn't have to suffer so much of the things that law boxers do, such as, cutting weight. He's a natural 125, 126, right? There's never been an issue of him having to cut weight. Kimura and Aoki, who aren't naturally gifted boxers, they have to work harder and harder and harder, and because they're not even they have a passion for boxing, but they don't have a talent, they don't have a foresight. Ippo takes a lot of things that come naturally to him for granted, such as the weight cutting. And even early on, you saw Ippo kind of, feel bad that he didn't have to weight cut, and he felt bad for everybody. But it was just recently in his trainer's arc, as him being a trainer, with Aoki and, well, not Aoki, but with Kimura, that he notices how hard weight cutting is, and that he had to weight cut with with Kimura, that the weight cutting is a problem that he's noticing. At least he's seeing it from the perspective of the person cutting weights. All right. So moving on, so I kind of just talked about their backstories and all that. And now moving on, focusing on Takamura, his story comes from, he came from a rich family, but he was sort of the black sheep of the family, disowned. So even though he was rich, he was disowned, and basically he used boxing and he found boxing as his way to be recognized and appreciated, right? But he, to lead his own way, he abandoned despite disowned by his family, Kageyama found him, raised him as his actual son, right? And Takamura found a father figure from him. And that's interesting. His relationship with Kageyama is that of a father and son, and he always wants to impress him. Give him that title, right? Kageyama said he wanted a world title to be part of the gym in sort of his backstory, right? He was going to train a Japanese fighter to win a world title. And he did that. He got Takamura. Takamura got him that title. But in the same instance, Takamura was, even though he won Kageyama the world title against Hawk, he always felt that it was never, he didn't earn it. Kageyama felt that Takamura, no matter who was the coach, would have won a title using him, because that's how naturally gifted Takamura is. And even though and that's why Kageyama wants Ippo to win a title for him, because he sees himself in Ippo more, and he sees that his style of boxing, if that's really true, the true form of boxing, and he's correct about that, if Ippo wins one, it sort of validates all of Kageyama's skills. But that just takes so much away from Takamura and his first championship fight and title, and when he won against Hawk. In my opinion, Takamura, if he was just using his natural training and all that, he would have lost. It's that balance from Takamura that he was able to win because he could throw wild punches, but at the same time, he trained. He trained with Kageyama to learn how to take that jab, to learn to do those combinations. Hawk, on the other hand, no, he would throw wild swings and everything, and his natural talent won him the way. He was able to dodge and then throw punches on unorthodox positions, which got him to win fights. Because he was a naturally gifted boxer, just like Takamura, but Takamura was able to use his natural gifted talents plus his technical training to push him far and ahead. Comparing the Hawks versus Eagle championship fights, those are two very in itself. I know I will have to probably do its own podcast of analyzing that fight. But in that fight, you kind of just saw the difference, right, of what it takes to be a champion. In the Hawks versus Takamura fight, Takamura had to make sure that he, stayed true to what Kageyama taught him, and then mix in some of that wildness, some of that natural, gifted, talented boxing, so he could win. In the next fight against Eagle, Takamura had to make sure that he, did more of that Brian Hawk's sort of wild punches and all that, but also at the same time, not giving up to being chivalrous and all that. You got to be that monster, which has been referenced to death since Takamura pointed that out to Ippo. And even though that's a lot after the Eagle fight, it is something that was proven true. I think the thing between what pushed Takamura over the edge against Eagle was that he didn't care about fighting chivalrously or being the honorable fighter. He got his eye basically injured to hell, and Eagle, because he was such a nice guy or such a nice boxer, decided, hey, I'm not gonna hit that damaged eye. While Takamura, on the other hand, when he accidentally elbowed and injured Eagle, he said, no, man, if that's your way to win, I'm gonna go for it. And if you would be crazy not to take that advantage. So just two little things to notice about that. from that perspective of Takamura and all Kimura, Kageyama, as much as he's a coach and all that, and his respect for and Takamura's respect for him, I really feel that it does Takamura such a disservice that Kageyama doesn't recognize that he didn't do anything for Takamura to achieve where he's achieved. And you sense that with Takamura. I think he loves Kageyama so much that when he found Ippo and he was so excited to use Ippo as sort of his test to see if his style actually worked, that Takamura felt betrayed. For sure, he felt more betrayed than anyone else, and took it to heart when Ippo decided to retire and not to do that. And in itself, it's from a place of love. Takamura, he really cares about Ippo, and I'm gonna go more into how and why he cares about Ippo in the future, in later on in this podcast. But he does care a lot, and from even I think from that moment of Takamura telling Ippo, you have to become a monster and cross the line to ever think about winning a title. That in itself is it from a place of care, because Takamura knows if Ippo's not going to take the world seriously, he will crash and burn. And that was kind of what happened. He didn't take it seriously. Whether the definition of becoming a monster is literally becoming a literal monster in the boxing ring, or some other aspect of it, he cares about Ippo so much that he will give him all this advice, not straightforward and all that, but as well, he's just gonna give him the advice. It might not be in the nicest way. Takamura's not the nicest type of guy, but still, it's from a place of care. And Takamura, as much as Kageyama has been the coach for Ippo, Takamura has been right there side by side. He found him, he became friends with him, he decided to accept him into the gym and all that. And Takamura was watching Ippo develop, and for him to quit, it does in a sense feel like a betrayal for him. Moving on, just talking about Ippo, and so how Ippo in Makunouchi Ippo's sense, he was kind of the opposite when you think about Takamura. Takamura was sort of a bully fighter, in his youth, and Ippo wasn't. He was the weakling kid who got bullied so much, and he had to grow into his confidence. And even growing, even though he was a successful boxer, and he kind of grew into his talents and his confidence outside of the boxing ring, he's sometimes not as confident as he is in the boxing ring, right? So that's a very key difference between him and Takamura. Ippo is always been like a nice guy, nice and caring person, while Takamura can be a real jerk asshole type of guy. As much as I love Takamura, he's a jerk, and he will do crazy batshit pranks on his friends and all that. And so we see that, right? The bullied and the bully and the bullied, but they have so much in common. Still, Ippo, in a sense, in his cowardliness and all that, and his ability to learn and care, it makes him a lot different. But at the same time, that is the thing that is giving him his caring attitude and all that, and his naivete is what sort of stops him from reaching that monster attitude and all that. And as we see, I talk about, Ippo himself, natural weight, he's a natural flyweight. He doesn't have to worry about Takamura. Takamura, in the first two bouts that he went for the title, he had to cut weight. And Ippo, his goal is to be strong, right? After the loss of his father, he wanted to know the meaning of what it is to be strong, and he's not reached there yet. He thought he was gonna get there when he won the Japanese title. Didn't happen. He thought he was going to, get it, and it's this ever founding thing. Will he find out? What will that answer be actually from the ring? I don't know. Hopefully when he fights, Martinez and everyone else, and his comeback, he'll start getting those pieces. Or is this just supposed to be an existential sort of question that he will never get the answer to? And it's just seeing, also, if we examine Ippo's relationship with Kageyama, it's a father-son type of relationship as well. Whereas Takamura, he respects Kageyama, but at the same time, he's willing to joke around with him and do all that. Ippo, on the other hand, is more like taking his he very nice, very generous, very respectful. He fears him. It's Kageyama. He won't, as much as he fears him and respects him. He's never gonna cross that line, and at times will hold himself back from saying something. And that's also the difference between Ippo and Takamura. Ippo thought that he didn't, at the end of his fighting career currently, he thought the best way I can end it is by showing Coach Kageyama the best technique of the Dempsey roll, the evolution of the Master Dempsey roll. And he was so obsessed with that, to show Kageyama that he perfected it, that it, sort of ruined his chances of winning that fight. He was so obsessed with doing this special move, that he worked so hard with, that he, lost the fight. Ippo, in his reverence of Kageyama and wanting to show him that all the respect, actually did the opposite thing. And I think that's one of the things that Takamura got really pissed off about, was that it's not about showing the move. Yes, you worked hard, but the main thing is to show this man respect, your coach respect, is to win that fight and try your best. And Ippo wasn't focused on that, and at the same time, that unfocusedness is like an issue where we're seeing, right? He wasn't focused, and he lost the fight. And I think in the future, we have to see if he actually has a reason, a main goal to go back to the Worlds, to win that title championship. Because without a reason, it's not going to be that interesting. And I think Takamura knows that. Like, he understands that, you need to have a reason. And if it has to be spelled out for Ippo or something like that, you would think that he has plenty of reasons, right? Just to go fight Martinez one more time. He got passed on the baton to, beat Martinez. Ippo sort of didn't understand the significance of that baton, that was passed to him. He just so matter-of-factly passes it on to someone else. And, it was such a disrespectful moment when I read that. Ippo really has to step back, and I think this training arc, him being a trainer arc, will really have him realize that, a lot has been put on his shoulders, not for himself, for the Japanese boxing community and all that. Every fighter he's fought has put like this expectation of Ippo, and he's so naive that he hasn't realized that yet, right? Hopefully he realizes that, and asks to get that baton back, so he can earn it, right? There's so much, and not even just the baton from Date. There is so many other things, such as if he actually wants to honor Kageyama and his skills, going back and trying that one more time to show that his level of boxing can win a title. That's the level of where Ippo has to go to. He needs to win that title, to just honor Kageyama and his skills, and his that fighting with spirit sort of mentality that Kageyama has always been famous for advertising. So moving on and returning to the real reason why Ippo and Takamura have the current rift between each other's relationship is because Ippo's mentality is his greatest weakness. I want to thank Reddit user Buzzkill1802 on the Hajime Ippo Reddit for posting the chapter 341 where Takamura mentions Ippo's weakness about his mentality, that his mental game in the ring is weak and that he gets easily flustered, which in the end makes matches way tougher for Ippo. You can totally sense this doubt, the self-doubt that he has a lot in the matches, especially in his match, in his first title match with Date. He was, doing well against Date, but Date had this confidence in him. He played the mental game. He told Ippo right before the match, like, your punches carry no weight. And that in itself, had Ippo would throw massive punches and all that. And Date, yeah, he had his little neck tricks and all that moved him, and, like, reduced the punches. But the damage was still there. Ippo was doing massive damage to Date. But his mentality, Ippo's mentality was the greatest thing that, lost him that title match. And he's been there a bunch of times. I think in a lot of fights where he dominates the first rounds, those middling rounds, sometimes he loses focus, or one big punch, gets his whole game messed up, his whole things, right? His mentality's weak, as I mentioned over and over again. And I think that's one of the reasons that Takamura really hates, this was in chapter 341, and now we're in chapter 1000. I forget, but we're pretty far ahead. This is years down the line, right? And Ippo's still having these same problems that Takamura mentioned so long ago. And I think that's one source of frustration for Takamura, that Ippo can't overcome that. Can't overcome like these simple things, right? In the fight with Jeromich, or Hammer now, Ippo, was, the whole match was about him feeling scared about fighting a former gym mate, and like, instead of just surpassing that, right? And in that sense, Ippo's got a long way to go. And when he returns to the match, he needs to fix that mental game, because coming into the match, he analyzes, his opponent, he comes up with a strategy with Kageyama. And then in the end, it's kind of like, oh no, he gets flustered now. He's got to face tank a bunch, and then hopefully Dempsey roll will save him, or some lucky punches will save him. And that works well, but it's not going to work well for in the world. He gets dominated. He gets flustered because someone's using a different technique or switches something up. You can't have that. And I think that in itself is his weakness, and he needs to overcome that. And I think that a little bit of that stems from his ultimate goal of becoming strong. He still does not feel like he's strong at all. He does not know what his strength is, right? So when he enters the boxing ring, he's already at a disadvantage because he himself doesn't have that confidence of thinking that he's strong. Takamura, on the other hand, he's cocky. He thinks he's the strongest in the world. He'll enter the boxing ring, and his opponent can dominate him, but in the end, in his mentality, he says, "Oh, you might be dominating me now, but you're just trying to make a joke of me." And then his mentality of "I'm the strongest" goes and helps him defeat his opponent. In that sense, right, there's a lot of trouble, and I think this goes back to that quote of Takamura telling Ippo, "If you want to win the worlds, you have to cross the line and become a monster." And in that sense, does that mean that Ippo has to abandon his natural characteristics? I don't believe that. I don't think so. I think Ippo can stay the same, but he needs to fix that mentality. I think crossing the line is fixing that mentality that you're not strong, that you're weak, and all that. I think Ippo has to confirm that in itself if he's going to go back to the ring. And then I think one aspect that Morikama George Morikama was really hyping. Like, Ippo has really never had a animal personification in the ring. We have Sendo. Takamura has his own versions of very animal, animal representations. Or inanimate objects such as Samura with his punches being like a gun, right? And then we have Vlog, with his animal representation as well. So there are a couple animal representations in the ring, or just Mishiba with the being the Grim Reaper, or Alf being the Mexican Grim Reaper as well. These sort of like nicknames, personas. Ippo really doesn't have that, and I think that's having some type of animal or inanimate object representation. Minyata has the wind god and stuff like that. Kronos for Itagaki, and so Ippo does need and once we start hearing his like ring name or something like that become animalistic or something, or some sort of dangerous machine, or that will be the point where Ippo crosses the line, right? He needs to become dangerous in the ring and sort of stop doubting himself. I think that's the major thing, and that doubt, and that fear is what's gonna always keep him from going to the Worlds. He'll be successful, with lucky punches and face tanking if he returns, but it's that switch of mindset, that in the ring you can do so much more, and not be afraid, that Ippo really needs to conquer. And that's what crossing the line and becoming a monster truly is. Does Ippo have to 100% change his characteristics and become the Ippo that we don't know? No, absolutely not. It's just in the ring, he needs to be confident and stick to game plans and all that. There are tons of matches where just someone switching to southpaw, someone doing something a little strange. With the Wooly fight, he fights like a monkey and all that, and just that unorthodoxness got Ippo so frazzled that, an easy match, that should have been an easy match for him. I think a lot of people hate the Wally fight because, who's this no-name person giving Ippo such a hard fight? And that's the reason. He gets frazzled. He gets all up in his mind. Even in his last fight before his retirement, his mindset was so focused on doing the perfected Dempsey roll instead of the actual fight. You're a boxer. This is a danger. You have one person almost trying to kill you, punching you, right, with all they've got, and you there are fooling around, not taking this seriously, showing like, oh, this is my last fight. I'm gonna show Kageyama the perfected Dempsey roll, the thing that he's trained me to do. And instead of, you shouldn't be caring about that. You should be caring about defeating your opponent. That's not paying respect to your opponent who's trying to knock your head off, to try to defeat you. So that in itself is what a fault. And I think Takamura has noticed that. And that not putting 100% in and having that spirit of a fighter and those ambitions is what Ippo is what Ippo has to do. And I think that's one of the current rifts, that Ippo, while his mental game was weak, he was still winning, and that winning at least kept Takamura okay with Ippo and all that. But that moment when he gave up, that was the that's what broke the camel's back, and that's what I believe currently is a major contention with why their relationship's so strained. So I think this is a good cutting off point. So thank you all for listening. This is the second episode, and I've already checked. A lot of people have been listening, at least a lot of people to me, and I thank you so much, and I will keep on improving. One couple things to check up on. You can check if you have any questions for the podcast. I will eventually, once I get better at this, have guests on and all that. But if you have any questions, I'm for sure would love to answer questions favorite moments, favorite theories. I'm willing and ready to discuss these things. So you can email me at thehajimenoippopodcast at gmail.com. I also made an Instagram, Hajime _ no _ ippo _ podcast. You can follow me there, response and all that. I will try releasing episodes every Sunday. Next week will be a new chapter, so it'll be a chapter discussion of what happened and my opinions on it. Big fight, so that I'm super excited about that. And once again, thank you all, and keep on fighting. Thank you.